live stream recording.
Here we go.
Okay, great. Okay, it is 6:30. We are now calling the Monday, March 8th, Amity Regional Board of Education meeting to order. Before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd just like to acknowledge, as most of you know, we lost one of our own this weekend. Raymond Kenny was an 8th grade student here at the Amity Orange. He passed away unexpectedly over the weekend, so we'd like to honor him with a moment of silence. Thank you. Now, would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And next we have the approval of minutes found on page 4. This is from the regular Board of Education meeting from February 8th, 2021. Would someone like to make a motion to accept the minutes? Carlson, thank you. We have a second, Ms. Cardozo, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, can we call the roll, please?
Yes, and just for the board members who are at home, we are trying out a new technology. So we will do our best to see how this works. But if for some reason it does not come through as clearly as we hope, we will circle back around to you and make sure that you're able to hear what we are presenting. So with that said, I will call the roll. Mr. Belfanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brow?
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo?
Yes.
Ms. Eichler?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
He said yes.
He said yes.
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
Kevin?
She's frozen.
She's muted.
Ms. McCrevin? Got it. Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Okay, that passes, thank you. Moving on to item 4, recognition of the National Merit Scholarship finalists. Dr. Byers.
So we have with us this evening Ms. Anna Mann, our principal of Amity Regional High School, and she is here tonight to let the board know who our National Merit Scholarship finalists are. These students do have a certificate waiting for them in the counseling office when they are in school tomorrow, and I will turn it over to Ms. Mann.
Thank you very much. As you may remember, in the fall, we came and presented to you the National Merit semifinalists and National Merit Commended Scholars. And of our 10 National Merit semifinalists, 9 of them have reached finalist status. So the following Amity Regional High School seniors are recognized as National Merit finalists. These students who scored among the top 1% nationally on their PSATs during junior year and are among the select 15,000 total students to be named as finalists have the opportunity to compete for National Merit Scholarships to the tune of $2,500 each, corporate-sponsored merit scholarships, and college-sponsored merit scholarships. And our finalists this year are Joshua Feuerstein, Evan Gorelick, Lily Johnson, Claudia Lahar, Kevin Liu, Peter Scully, Hannah Skiba, Jonathan Wang, and Zhengyan Wang. Congratulations to all 9 of you. You make us proud.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our student report. We have our 2 student representatives with us this evening, I see.
Yes, hi everyone. So we're going to start off with the high school. So with the announcement that the high school will be transitioning to a full in-person instructional model, students have generally been feeling very eager to get back into the classroom with a full class again. We're very excited to feel some sort of normalcy returning to the school environment and are waiting in anticipation of March 22nd. The course selection process for underclassmen is well underway. Students completed their course selection forms and parents approved them by March 5th. Starting February 22nd, athletes have been allowed to bring 2 family members to their games. As of March 5th, 42 total students, faculty, and staff are also able to attend Amity athletic events, and all spectators are required to pre-register and follow all safety protocols. And the high school's honor societies are hosting a wide variety of activities for students. The National Art Honor Society is holding a mask making contest until the 31st. The Math Honor Society is hosting a pie-themed baking competition in honor of Pi Day, and Chinese Honor Society hosted a virtual cookie night. Along with this, Amity Student Government is currently holding a coat drive for the New Reach Shelter in New Haven.
Moving on to the middle schools. At the Bethany Middle School, the 8th graders are participating in an Amistad presentation this week. Students will gather in the cafeteria and classrooms to participate in a variety of activities. The 7th graders on the green team at the middle school have been participating in an African drumming lesson with Mr. DuPont, where they have learned different beats and practiced on water jug drums. At the Orange Middle School on March 17th, students will take a virtual trip to the Amistad. Again, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. 7th grade students will explore the impact of the slave trade on African culture. 8th grade students will participate in an interactive dialogue on racial injustice today. Students will then have a dialogue on their strengths and what skills they may want to acquire. Middle school basketball is set to resume March 9th. The AMSO boys versus the Bethany boys tip-off is at 4:30 tomorrow. That concludes the student report.
Great. Thank you, students. Any questions for our students? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the public comment. Ms. Eichler, do we have some public comment?
We do. We have some public comment that I believe was intended for our last meeting. However, it did not make the 2 o'clock cutoff. So there are 6 letters writing to advocate for avoiding any cuts to any programs or staff in the 2021-2022 budget. And the public comment was submitted by Jason Advent, from Kathy and Keith Anderson, Jason Kirk, Michelle Tenney, Feng Jia, and Nick Dettori. And there was 3 letters written for public comment at this meeting. All 3 letters were regarding concerns on the content of a Spartan seminar in February addressing Black History Month. And the students, there were 2 students that submitted some comments, Sage Paglia and Ian Glassman, and a parent, Heather Parody. And everyone has a copy of those comments. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 7, the superintendent's report. Dr.
So first of all, those of you who are here in person, you have a gift sitting on your desk this evening, because March is National Board Member Appreciation, School Board Member Appreciation Month. And so on behalf of the students and of the Amity community, we would just like to say thank you. We made sure that your gift is appropriately available for social distancing as needed. For those of you who are at home, these will be available if you are going to be in attendance at the next board meeting. You can certainly come by the district office and pick them up. And in the very end, I'm sure Ms. Carroll will mail them out to your houses when they're still sitting in her office as we get towards May. So, but we do hope that you're able to stop by and get them. And again, truly, we just want to say thank you because we know the amount of time and effort that goes into being a board member, and you do an amazing job supporting our kids and our families. So we truly appreciate it. I would also like to recognize our Pupil Services Director, Mr. Tom Brandt. He was named as the Connecticut delegate to the National Association of School Psychologists. So that is a very big deal for Mr. Brandt, but we're also very happy to have Connecticut represented by such a fine individual and somebody from Amity. And lastly, I would really like to recognize our entire community. About a little over a week ago, we put out a call for Medical Reserve Corps volunteers to help Quinnipiac Valley Health District and the Orange Health Department in the vaccination process, particularly as we schedule educator clinics. In speaking with the volunteer coordinator from QVHD, she was, to put it mildly, overwhelmed with the response from our families, and she now has more than enough volunteers that she can use to help schedule these clinics. Since QVHD runs entirely on volunteers, it really has been a critical piece in our vaccination program, not just for the teachers of Amity, but also for those in Bethany, Woodbridge, and North Haven, and certainly just for the communities that QVHD serves. So again, I just have to say thanks to the entire community for responding and for reaching out to support all of us. It's one of those it takes a village moments, and we do truly appreciate that. So then, I believe the next item is COVID instructional model updates.
Sure.
So give me a second.
Hit the escape button on the keyboard.
Huh?
Just escape on the keyboard.
So
Down the bottom.
No pressure with everybody watching.
I know. Oops, I guess I have to share the screen now. That would help. All right. So, big news happening in Amity District, so very exciting. So I just wanted to brief the board quickly on some of our next changes to our instructional model. So of course, we've been meeting consistently with the health departments every single Friday morning. Those meetings have gotten much shorter, which is kind of nice, so we can move on with our day because they have gotten to be a little bit redundant and boring, which is the good news for BOA. We certainly have seen a decrease in the leading indicator of COVID-19 in our schools and communities. We have also seen a significant decrease in all three of the secondary indicators. Both of our health districts are reporting an overall decrease in community spread, and we certainly have seen a decrease in the number of students and staff in isolation, as well as students and staff in quarantine. Add that to the number of people within the educational community who have been vaccinated at this point, as well as just the overall number of adults that are vaccinated in the community. We are in a very good place to make some changes to our instructional models. The couple other things that you can see, this is the number of cases per 100,000. This has been basically since the start of the school year, when I actually started tracking this data, up until the most recent data point that we had last week. So you can certainly see that spike that they had anticipated would occur around the time of the holidays. And we are basically right about back in the exact same place that we were back when we wanted to reopen the schools in the end of October / beginning of November. So that is helping. This is our percent test positivity in the community. Again, you can see that it sort of jumps around depending on which town we're looking at, but we certainly hit a spike, again, right about at the same time as the holidays, and we are definitely dropping back down into a lower percent test positivity rate. So those are the leading and secondary indicators that we're actually able to show graphically. So starting on March 22nd, the high school will be returning to full in-person learning 5 days a week. Parents will still have the option to have students participate in voluntary remote learning. But again, we talked about this back in the fall. Parents either follow the model that the school will be operating under, or they are remote. And our model will be everybody coming to school 5 days a week. We will still have the same schedule, 7:34 to 12:47. We have not quite figured out the lunch distribution yet inside of the school. So students will still have the option to take the grab and go lunch. They will still leave the school grounds, go home, change for after-school activities like athletics and some of our performing arts programs. And based kind of on the current voluntary opt-outs, we're probably looking at around 75% capacity. That number kind of fluctuates on a week-to-week basis, but that's what we're going to be assuming we'll probably see based on where we currently sit right now. The middle school changes are going to return to a full day of instruction, so 7:34 in the morning to 2:18 in the afternoon. That is going to be 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesdays are going to be half days with that 12:12 dismissal, which was kind of our original half-day dismissal time. And the intention of that was, it was part of our agreement that we made with the teachers union back in August. So that afternoon time is really for them to use for planning the remote instruction and for also having some time to work with those students who are going to be in that remote learning. Based on the middle school opt-outs, we're looking at a little bit more like 80% of full in-person attendance. So the middle schools have a slightly higher attendance rate. They will still be cohorted. They will be cohorted in their lunchrooms as well. And I think that's kind of the most significant change, is that we are going to start providing our lunch and cafeteria service here in the middle schools. So what that's going to look like. At the middle school, they are going to go from having 2 lunches to having 4 lunches. So essentially, each team will have lunch together. They are going to sit by cohort and assign seats, so they'll be numbered so we can do the contact tracing more effectively, because we'll always know that Ms. Carlson or Shannon is sitting in seat 3, and we'll know everybody who is sitting around her in seat 3. We are purchasing portable hand washing stations so that we are able to have additional hand washing stations prior to the students coming into the cafeteria. That was a consistent recommendation from both the Orange Health Department and Quinnipiac Valley as we started to do the walkthroughs with them. The seating will actually be individual desks. This is the Orange Middle School cafeteria. So the desks will all face in one direction, and eventually they will all have some dividers around them. We'll show you that at Bethany, because that's how they're set up. And then definitely, once weather is permitting, we will be able to have the kids have some outdoor lunch options, whether it's at tables or bringing towels and sort of having a picnic-like lunch outside. That's what we'll try to do in our courtyard areas at both of the middle schools. That's Bethany. So remember, Bethany has the 2 smaller cafeterias, so that's why it looks like there's a few less desks in there, because there definitely are. They're set up with their dividers at this point. We'll have floor markers and arrows in the serving area, so that way we have a nice flow of students through the cafeterias. We'll definitely minimize student touch points, so things like the spork and the straw and the napkin inside of a package instead of the kids grabbing it. We'll make sure we use condiment packages instead of sort of the pumps that we would see. We'll kind of still have that sort of grab and go option. It just may look a little bit different. We're going to use the student IDs to track the sale, because they'll actually they're free lunches still, but we need to get a count of those, and so we'll just have the students use their ID to swipe as they go through the end of the line. And then we definitely, in making those 4 lunch waves, we will change our custodial staff support during the day so that we have more people to clean the desks between each wave, and we've added time between each wave so that we have the time to clean the desks. So we feel that we're pretty well prepared for those lunches. We've had QBHD come visit. They gave us feedback. We will have the Orange Health Department hopefully this week. Some of the impacts of the changes, I think we need to be prepared for this. that if we increase our density, if we do have an index case occur in the school, we will have more students who are identified as close contacts, so we will see increases in our quarantine numbers, but that's obviously the trade-off of bringing all of our kids back. We are definitely going to have an increase in the number of parents at the high school for drop-off and pickup. So I've already started to talk to the town of Woodbridge about that, and I'm sure the high school staff is wrapping their heads around what that's going to be like when it's essentially doubled. On Wednesdays, middle school students will actually be home before their high school siblings because the middle school will dismiss at 12:12 and the high school will still dismiss at 12:47, all of which can result in slightly more variability between the high school and the middle school schedule, but I think variability has been the name of the game since the start of the school year, so I'm not really too concerned about that. We will continue to work with the health districts right up until that last Friday, before March, I guess it's March 20th maybe, or 19th, to make sure that we're good to go. And we'll send out that final communication to our families for what we hope is a start on March 22nd. So I think that's it. Yes. So I don't know if there are any questions about the reopening, next phase of reopening of the schools. I know, I guess I have to. No, I see a whole bunch of mute buttons, so I'm guessing there are no questions.
Dr. Byers,
Dr. Turner.
how does this affect activities? Are there still going to be Zoom options for remote kids? Can they come in if not?
So if the activity like a club is meeting virtually, which most of our clubs still are, remote students are able to participate in those when those are virtual. In order to participate in in-person activities, namely athletics, and then as we start to the spring musical, that performing arts, students have to be in-person learners in order to participate in in-person activities. But we do still anticipate most of our clubs will continue to function in a remote manner because at the end of the school day, we send all of our students home. And then those that are participating in in-person activities actually have to come back prepared to start their in-person activity.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Davis and then Ms. McCrudden.
Dr. Byers, this actually relates to your regular report. I know I've received some concerns about the presentation that was done in Spartan Seminar, and I'm just wondering if it would be possible for you to work with the administration to get us a little bit more background and details so that we may be made aware of what some of the issues were and how they're being addressed.
So we would certainly be happy to do that. Since that came through to the board via public comment, we can essentially respond to the board through communication after this evening's meeting.
Thank you.
Ms. McCrudden.
I just had a question just to go back to the changes that will come when we're more in person. I think I understood you to say about the expectations about 75% or 80% of students would attend. Does that change how many students are going to fit in a classroom and how far you'll be able to move the desks apart, that sort of social distancing piece?
So we've had our desks set up since the beginning as if we've been at 100% capacity. When we have found rooms that seemed overcrowded, we have either moved the students or we've changed the location. The high school has been working somewhat last week, but more diligently this week to get all of the desks in. And then we actually have to mark the floor kind of where the desk needs to be because when kids come into the rooms, the desks sort of migrate. And so now we're going to try to help our custodial staff know where to put the desks back at night so that we can maximize the physical distancing. We have received, especially when we were at the middle school, feedback as to how we can best arrange the desks in some of those more crowded classrooms. So once we do have the students back at the high school, we'll probably have one last visit from the health districts so that they can see it when it's at full capacity, because thus far they've only seen it in the hybrid model. But we will still be within the parameters that the state and our health districts always sort of recommended, which is, to try to get as close to 6 feet as we possibly can. And in most cases, we're somewhere in that 4 to 5 foot range. Any other questions?
Well, thank you, Dr. Byers, to you and your team. This was welcome news. I know there's been a lot of people waiting for this, and we've been patient, and we're very excited. So thank you very much.
Great, we're excited too. I'm just going to stand here because I think I'm next.
Okay. So you're moving on to, are we on to the superintendent report still, or are we on to the
No,
Board of
we're on to
Education?
budget.
Presentation?
Number 8, we are on to item 8.
We're on to
Yes.
8. Great. Let's go. Presentation of possible action on superintendent's proposed 2021-2022 budget.
All right.
Page 16.
So this is going to be hopefully my final presentation of the superintendent's budget, because I believe you have a memo in your packet from Ms. Loomis that has the changes that have been, a summary of the changes that have been made, as well as a motion that we hope occurs at the end of the presentation. So I think you guys have seen this slide enough. You understand the budget process. But we are definitely down into that last bar on the page where we are making the final recommendation. So I just kind of wanted to take us back through the budget over time so you can understand where we ended up working from. If you remember, our initial school and department request came in at about 7%. Then we have our administrative meeting where we try to make reductions by looking for redundancies or prioritizing some of those requests. That brought us down to the 5.92%. And then Ms. Loomis and I will continue to go through essentially line by line, looking at historic spending patterns. And that got us to the 4.75% budget increase, which I presented to both the board and the AFC in January. Then when we went out to the town finance meetings, which were sort of towards the end of January, at that point we had the contract ratifications from both the teachers and the admin assistants, as well as our fuel bid prices come in. And so we were able to present a 3.72 budget. That was our definite known budget at that time. I came before the board in February and presented a 2.81. That budget included some reductions to some of our teaching positions, which Ms. Eichler summarized the additional comments that we received after the 70 or so comments we received at the February board meeting. And so essentially you as a board charged Ms. Loomis and I to sort of go back to the drawing board and to look for reductions in other places. You also gave us a couple of ideas and suggestions for where we might be able to find that. So we took your charge in hand and we did do that. And in February, at the end of the month, we presented to the AFC a 1.80% budget increase. And that is what we are presenting to you this evening. The reason why the January budget is in bold is because that was really the last true budget that we had to work off of. So what we essentially did, because this one took out so many teaching positions, we went back to the 3.72 and started making our reductions from there. Does that make sense for everybody? Yeah. So remaining in the budget, just so that we're very clear, are 2 certified staff positions that were proposed to be taken from the middle school. It does mean that we maintain the exact health and PE structure that we have at the middle school. It also means we will maintain the Mandarin instruction that we have at the middle school. We also put back into the budget the 10 days of summer work for our department chairs. Ms. Loomis did an analysis over those used for the past 5 years and found that those individuals truly use those days in preparation for the upcoming school year. What came out of the budget, again, from the 3.72% proposal, we did bring the health insurance reserve down, maybe not quite as boldly as Mr. Rao's suggestion of 18%, but we did bring it down to 22%, which saved us some funds there. We had our final rates come in from Anthem at the end of the month, and they were favorable based on the claims that we've had thus far this year. We were able to reduce some other benefits, putting back in some of the money that for unemployment costs, also some of the benefits that came from some of the position reductions. Mr. Brandt has been able to return 2 out-of-district placements at this point. So we had some additional savings there from bringing some students back into the Amity district. We did take out some of the new proposed positions, as well as some positions that are existing, and we'll summarize those for you a little bit later. Some of our instructional supplies, the music instrument lease, student agendas, sidewalk repair, musical instruments we propose moving into the capital plan. The sidewalk repair we have to do right now, and now that we're in a one-to-one environment, the idea of kids carrying around paper agendas is sort of antiquated, so we decided we could probably take most of those out. We did actually have to add in some more devices for remote work, and then we are going to offset some of our items with the ESSER 2 funds, which is the grant that's coming through as a result of COVID. So it essentially gave us a reduction of $973,000 off of that 3.72% proposal. There are 2 staff reductions that are still remaining, 3 positions in the budget. We are still proposing that we have an elimination of the literacy teacher at the middle school and converting that into a coach to help us with the implementation of the Reader's Workshop program. That reduction in literacy will mean that general music moves into the life arts rotation. Again, this was kind of a long-term plan. It got a little stalled by COVID, but because of a retirement, we're able to do this now without having a reduction in force. We will still look at the elimination of a 10-month secretary, again at the middle school level, where they will share a floater between the 2 middle schools over the course of the 5 days. And then finally, the elimination of the support services team leader at the middle schools, where some of those roles and responsibilities will be assumed by the middle school pupil services coordinator, which was a new position that we had in place this year. So this proposal was approved by the AFC in a 5-to-1 vote last week. You can look at the town allocations. Bethany actually goes below 0 because of their enrollment. Orange is slightly below 1, the 0.93, and then Woodbridge is at a 3.3, again, because of enrollment. I did have a meeting this morning with the selectmen of the town. They are aware that this was what was approved, and they seemed to not give glowing feedback, but didn't express their continued interest in having us further reduce the budget at this time. So that is why we are presenting to you this evening the 1.80% budget. And I am happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Byers?
There's still 4%. We can go from 22 to 18. There's still that 4% there. That's at least, what, 200-something thousand, right? Or more.
I'd have to do the calculation of what the new claims rate is.
But did you go back to the insurance and get advice, or was it just as a comfort, 3% reduction from what we were talking about before?
No, we sought advice because there's still the uncertainty. Even Anthem developing our claims used a new model going forward because just history alone for the past 18 months is difficult for them to project forward. So their underwriters had a new method. So there is that level of uncertainty. And so the discussion was, if you do go back, if you do see the rise and you hit your 25% match, you're going from 22 to 25%. It's a much smaller amount to make up than to go from 18 to 25 if we do see that large spike. And then if 22% holds well for next year, that's something, if we want, as this board recommends, to go down to 20%, still have room in the following year's budget to step backwards from that.
And we're already, this year so far, we're 700 or so thousand. We've never hit our over reserve, you say. We never touched it. We never touched the reserve.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think it's important for the board to consider that, once again, we have a budget that is less than our contractual obligations. We're going to be in the same position next year, where we will have contractual obligations up around the mid to high twos, and I'm sure that there will be a continued request that we lower that. So we really thought of this as kind of a long-term plan.
Yeah.
And that if we really are successful with the 22%, it does give us a place where we can continue to look for reductions that will help offset those contractual increases. If it's not comfortable, it's not such an insurmountable difference that we have to make up. And so Ms. Loomis and I felt that we hit a sweet spot where we could be sensitive to the needs of the town, but also make sure that we don't put the board into the red by poor budgeting tactics. Ms. McCrevin, and then Mr. Davis.
Thank you. I guess, so I had, and you referenced that we had made some suggestions at previous meetings. I know I had talked a little bit about capital non-recurring. I'm not seeing any changes there, so I guess I have a different question. Things like sidewalk repair, or let's say something else comes up between now and the end of this school year. Is it possible to pull from capital non-recurring for expenses? I'm not sure how quickly we can get money out of capital non-recurring, and if the board has an interest in finding out if some of that money can be expended. If we were to do it this year, that would either add to a surplus or give us enough money to complete the year. We still don't know what the end of the year holds for us. But I just thought I would put that out, because the capital non-recurring budget, from my point of view, it seems like we have that rebate money in there that came from the fuel cell project many years ago. At the time, we talked about that money would not get stranded there. But to the extent that it is stranded there, have you thought any more about ways we might be able to get it out?
So Ms. Loomis can certainly speak to it, but I don't believe that there's any sort of holdup in getting that, having access to that money, other than we would follow our AFC procedures of making sure that the AFC approved of the use of the funds and the board approved the use of the funds, because that would be an unbudgeted expenditure of funds. So it would just have to go through a regular board meeting process. But in terms of actually accessing it, it's very much available. The reason why we didn't make recommendations to take anything from the operational budget and shift it into that capital, that plan, sort of traditional things, is we would end up just creating the exact same problem that we created with textbooks last year. So when you take something out of the budget that you know you're always going to have to continue to provide for, then the following year you just see a dramatic increase in that line. And so the same thing would have happened with some of the the capital items that are part of our operational budget. However, we are continuing to look at our capital plan and really start to identify things that can come from that capital reserve fund. So if the board was so inclined to set aside another 1% next year, for example, we could purchase the musical instruments that the middle schools have been begging for now since I started working here. We would be able to make the improvements to the lecture hall that we would like to make so that it's a true learning space instead of kind of the place that it is at the moment. We know we have a couple projects coming down the way, most importantly our phone system replacement, that at some point is going to become a critical issue, and we would rather address that ahead of time than have it break and not have a working phone system in the school district while Mr. DeRosa scrambles to try to get it back together. So we believe that I think going forward, that capital money can be used for some of those projects that we really have continued to kind of just keep pushing sort of down the road. But those recurring things like sidewalk repair or painting the lockers or draining the field in orange that happen every few years, those you want to maintain in the budget, or you're just going to, like I said, run into the same problem we've run into when we sort of fell swoop cut out a line item from the operational budget and then had to put it back in the following year.
So I'm not sure I understand, because I thought I understood that the sidewalks are going to be done with existing this fiscal year funds. Did I miss that though?
They are. They're part of what we moved from the capital plan to this current year because they need the repairs now.
So would the board also be able to, because the sidewalks haven't been repaired yet, right? So if the board chose to, could we use that rebate money from the fuel cell to pay for the sidewalks?
Absolutely could, but then all you're doing is creating a larger surplus in board funds at the end of the year, which we all know we get scolded for by the towns for having it left over. So it makes much more
Only
sense.
when we don't give it back, I think. They don't mind when we're issuing checks to them.
Sometimes they do.
So it's something that we could consider when the sidewalk project is ready to actually be done. We could consider a funding source for it. Is that right?
You could always consider that as a funding source, yes.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Davis, you had a question.
Yes, and I know you've spoken to this before. The literacy program at the middle schools is going to change dramatically, I believe. And it's something that has been worked on for a considerable period of time, as you've explained it. How will the student experience that difference? What's going to change, and how will it impact the literacy as it does change?
So I could give an entire night of discussion on what Reader's Workshop is, but I'll try to summarize it up fairly quickly. Reader's Workshop is a model of instruction that's really founded much more in student choice and agency. So it really shifts from the idea of everybody reading just a whole class novel, that the students may be reading a whole class novel, but they will oftentimes be reading their own independent novels as well, and finding the connections and the understanding between those, and then not just between the books they're reading, but also what their other students are reading. The way that we're going to approach it is sort of a phased-in process. So we will have our teachers work on probably 2 units next year, where you'll see kind of a real difference in what they are doing. If the teachers are comfortable, they can continue to pursue that, but if they are not, we'll phase in additional units over the next couple of years. What parents should really see as an outcome of this, and it's one of the measures that they have of its success, is their kids just reading more independently and being more engaged in reading more books over the course of a school year, and coming with that reading stamina and some of the reading skills that we expect students to see or to have. So I guess that's the easiest way to explain it, but I could certainly have Dr. McPadden be prepared to give a more thorough explanation of Reader's Workshop, either to the curriculum committee or to the full board if there was interest in that. Other questions?
Ms. Eichler has one behind you.
Okay.
Just to piggyback off of the Reader's Workshop, you mentioned a literacy coach. What is that position like, or is it a position?
So what literacy coaches usually serve to do is really to help the teachers through the process of working within the Reader's Workshop model. We will be providing 3 of our teachers time this summer to work at Teachers College and Columbia University, which is where the Reader's Workshop model developed from. So they will get that type of training so that they are experts within the school and can be a resource for our staff. Our idea is that in the first 2 years, that literacy coach is going to work pretty exclusively with the English teachers, because they will be most directly connected in developing and delivering the Reader's Workshop model. As the English teachers become more accustomed to that coach can start to phase out from English and go into the other content areas, so that they're able to help our content area teachers understand strategies that can be used, literacy strategies that can be used to help students understand the texts in science and social studies and arts.
So that So that person, that coach, that doesn't have a budget impact? I mean,
So
how does that work?
we have 6 reading teachers right now, and they basically, 2 of them teach literacy in the rounds, and the other 4 provide intervention. So one of those teachers is going to retire, and so then we have 5. If one of those teachers becomes the coach, then we still have 2 teachers providing the intervention, but we don't have anybody to teach literacy, which is why the general music goes into the rounds. So no, there's no budgetary impact. There's actually a savings to the whole process overall. But my fingers are the easiest way to explain it.
We appreciated that.
You got it.
Any other questions?
I see Ms. Burke.
So I just wanted to follow up on that and ask, since the general music is now going to be moved into the life arts category, and it's going to be therefore taken out of the category where it was I guess, an elective choice with choir and band, and I believe Chinese or intro to Chinese. So I guess my question is, has that been taken into consideration? I'm assuming that obviously the numbers in the other 3 electives are going to have to increase. What if there is a large amount of students who happen to choose the Chinese option? And how is that going to affect that course load in terms of numbers for the teachers that are currently teaching that course?
So I can say, yes, that's been taken into consideration. I do not have the actual class projections for next year's middle school classes. But we did run the scheduling changes past the middle school administrative team, because they're the ones who actually have to put this in place. So what those changes look like, I can't provide you a direct answer right now, but they seem to indicate that they would be able to manage the scheduling changes. Yes, class sizes in some of those classes, particularly band and chorus, will increase. We are anticipating that.
Right. I mean, I'm obviously aware that band and choir, they can certainly do that. They have the spacing. I just wasn't sure about I was more concerned about the Chinese teacher and this class size.
The Chinese language teacher is able to be governed by the teacher's contract, so that kind of limits the number of students that are going to be in that class anyway.
So if there was more than the number of students who wanted to participate in the Chinese course, they would have to choose something else if it was full then, correct? Somehow you'd have to figure that out, I guess.
They always have had to choose something else because we've always had limited capacity with that teacher.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
I'm not seeing any.
Dr. Byers, thank you and your team, and Ms. Loomis for all the hard work you put in. This was quite a year to do this. You know, it's difficult in a normal year, never mind with the cloud that you had over you with all the other things you had going on. So we really appreciate the efficiency in which you did that and getting down to the number you got. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that brings us to a motion, I believe, that needs to be made. Okay,
Yes.
so that's on page 17. Would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Mr. DeMayo. Give it a second. Ms. Cardozo, thank you. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Would you like to read the motion, Mr. DeMayo?
Sure.
Thank you.
Move to approve the proposed budget of the fiscal year 2021 to 2022 in the gross amount of $51,698,207 American dollars and a net amount of $50,495,237 American dollars.
Thank you. Ms. Cardozo was our second. Can we call the roll?
I think so,
Okay.
because I don't see any more discussion. So,
Okay.
Mr. Belfonte,
Yes.
Mr. Brow,
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo,
Yes.
Ms. Eichler,
Yes.
Ms. Burke,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes.
Turner.
Yes.
Great, that motion passes. Thank you, everyone. And then there's another motion regarding explanatory text found at the bottom of page 17. Would someone like to make that motion?
Make the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson.
I'll second it.
Ms. Mayo, seconds.
Would you like to read that motion, Ms.
Sure,
Carlson?
So we move to authorize Amity Regional School District number 5 to prepare an explanatory text for the budget referendum question. Be it resolved that the Secretary of the Board of Education of Amity Regional School District number 5 is authorized to prepare, print, and distribute a concise explanatory text of the budget referendum question which, by vote of the member towns, which text shall not advocate either the approval or disapproval of the question and shall otherwise be prepared in accordance with Connecticut General Statute Section 9-369B.
Thank you. Any discussion regarding that motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the vote, please.
Mr. Belfanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo?
Yes.
Ms. Eichler?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
And that motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, moving on to item number 9, discussion and possible action on educational research proposal in Amity Regional School District number 5.
So my apologies that you received the information rather last minute, but sometimes that's what happens when researchers send things at the last minute. However, I would like to advocate support of this research. It actually started as a science research project by an Amity student when she was a research assistant back in the 2018-19 school year. She has since graduated and gone on to Southern Connecticut State University, where she is continuing to work with this professor on this particular research. And it's part of the reason why the Amity district was selected. But I would also certainly like to continue to support our students as they pursue their passions and interests outside of Amity. We actually already conducted somewhat similar research 2 years ago when she was here in school, using the program that she had helped to develop. And so this is really now a more robustly funded research program that the lead professor and his assistants are looking to do. So I did have some communication with him. A couple board members did send in some questions. So I'm more than happy to provide any further information if board members would like, or I'll try to provide further information.
Well, would someone like to make a motion to accept it, and then we can discuss, Dr. Byers?
Sure.
Okay. Would anyone like
Okay,
to
I'll
make
make
that
a
motion?
motion to accept the
Ms.
research
Carlson.
proposal.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Eichler, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Byers?
Mr. Rao?
Is it being funded by anybody?
Yes, I believe it is being funded by the National Science Foundation, I think, and that's part of the reason why they started to make the request. And they also had a deadline of Friday to submit the application. I told them they had to wait until tonight, and I would get back with them tomorrow. So yes, there is a funding source, and I think it's NSF.
Okay, so have a motion and a second. If there's no other further questions, we can call the roll.
Mr. Belfanti?
Yes.
Mr. Rao?
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo?
Yes.
Ms. Eichler?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Howard?
Rosen?
Oops,
Oh. I said yes.
there we go. Okay, we got some movement there. Ms. Hubbard?
Yes.
Ms. McCrevin?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Dr. Turner?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. That motion passes. Okay, moving on to correspondence. Ms. Eichler.
We received 2 letters of correspondence, and I believe everyone has a copy. The first one was sent on February 23rd from the office of Beth Heller, the Woodbridge First Selectman, regarding any potential cuts to middle school programs or staff, not being in support of that. The second letter we received on the 25th of February from Jason Morrill, who is the chairman of the Woodbridge Conservation Commission. And this is in regards to the athletic field construction.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to chairman's reports. Why don't we start with Ms. Burke for ACES?
So yes, ACES, we did meet on February 11th. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the meeting because I had a work conflict, but I did review all of the notes, and I just have a short report to give based on the notes, the minutes, I apologize. I'd like to report that we currently have 22 students attending the ACES programs, a majority of which are at ECA. I believe 17 of the 22 are at ECA. And the important thing to note is that ACES is currently in negotiation for purchase of the Chase Collegiate property, which is located in Waterbury, Connecticut, as a new location for the current Thomas Edison Magnet Middle School that is currently located in Meriden. That building was reclaimed by the city of Meriden, and therefore ACES is in negotiation for this property to relocate and expand its programming. So that's something that may or may not be available if this goes through to future Amity students as well, now that they're going to be able to greatly expand the number of students that will be able to attend at this location. And that's all I have to report.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to ad hoc school safety, Mr. DeMayo.
We've not had a meeting.
Okay. And Kate, Ms. McCrone.
For the CABE report tonight, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to, I'm sure we're receiving these, but you may not have opened the email. The March 2nd CABE advocacy series is the virtual meetings, and there's a series of them, including a virtual day on the Hill, which they are having on March 17th. Then they're having one on to talk specifically about the education committee bills as the education committee approaches their JF deadline. So that's April 6th. Then they have one on April 26th to focus on appropriations. And then lastly, they'll do their traditional wrap up of the legislative session in a webinar on June 14th. All of these webinars are free to attend. And if you register for them, and I believe they're all recorded, so register, even if you're not able to watch it live, you'll be able to access the recording, and then you can review that on your own time, just to keep up to date on what's happening up in Hartford. That's the CABE report for you.
Thank you, Ms. McCrone. Moving on to curriculum, Ms. Carlson.
Sure. So we have 3 possible textbook proposals that we can act on this evening. They've all have been approved by building administration, the steering committees, Dr. McPadden, and then presented to us, the curriculum committee. We had Kara Haas, the department chair of the history department, present to us the textbook, Thinking About Psychology, the Science of Mind and Behavior. And this is because the textbook, I believe, and Dr. McPadden, jump in if I'm wrong, is very outdated, the current textbook. So this is a replacement, which is long overdue from what she shared with us. All the links are there. I'm not sure if you've had time to review any of them, but they are amazing instructional resources and tools for kids. And then we had Angelo Amato, the science department chair, present to us on the 2 textbooks for anatomy and physiology for both level 1, 2, 3, and then in the honors, a textbook for the honors course.
I'd like to make a motion
Yes.
that we take all 3 together.
I don't think you need that motion because items 1, 2, and 3 are all under item A, which is discussion and possible action on textbook proposals. So it's already put together.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the textbook proposals.
I'll second that.
Very good. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Belfonte?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo?
Yes.
Ms. Eichler?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
McCrevin?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Turner?
Okay, that motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Carlson. Moving on to the District Health and Safety Committee. Mr. DeMayo.
We have not had a meeting.
Okay, and District Technology.
There's a monthly report, but we have not had a meeting.
Okay, that's on page 55. And moving on to facilities.
We have not had a meeting. There is a report on page 56. Mr. Martoni has done some nice work on the air handler negotiations, which we'll hear about later. The gym floor is finished. They're still looking at the lights as far as the possible cause of the fires. I wasn't sure, do we have any update on the schedule for the field or anything there? Or we're still, are those meetings starting back up yet? Those field meetings?
So we have not had any planning meetings since January,
Yeah.
when we started to kind of craft out a timeline and a plan. However, I am very happy to report, I think we did mention to the facilities committee that we would start any parts of the project earlier if we could, as long as it did not create a disruption to the spring sports activities. So we actually started digging today, working on the pole vault pit area, because that's a whole totally new part of the track. So we're not disrupting the existing pole vault pit area, but we are able to start making some progress on that particular portion of the project. So we are, I guess, essentially under construction officially as of today.
Shovel in ground.
Yes.
Right.
That's exciting.
Great. Well, we'll talk more, and we'll do a meeting for, coming up, for maybe for the next. Sure. Meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to finance.
Well, thank you. As you know, the AFC did meet and did have a special meeting to discuss the budget, so we're thrilled to have it go through the ABOE as well. And now I'd like to turn over to Ms. Loomis for the latest with the air handlers.
So we put out a bid in February for the remaining air handler projects. If you remember back from the 2016 Van Zelms report and the second phase of the bond that we took out in July of 2020. So there's 3 air handlers and some ductwork, some VAV valves, baseboard, and cooling coils. So we had 4 vendors walk through the pre-bid meeting, and we had 1 vendor submit a bid. It is a vendor who has been the low bidder on the last 3 projects. We have quite a bit of experience with them, and we are satisfied with them. The original price they came in with included a couple of alternates, and that was, as Van Zelm, we looked at the work they had done back in 2016, the condition of some of the return air fans. The recommendation was to replace some of those, as they were from the 1990s and now would be meeting up with brand new air handler units. So all inclusive of the 3 alternatives, the project came in at $1,241,600. Our remaining budget for air handlers was $1,165,000, which was not inclusive of the alternates. But Mr. Martoni went back to save more cooling, and because they're the low bidder, the only bidder, our policy does allow us to negotiate with them and ask if they could bring that price down, and was able to negotiate a reduction of $22,000. So I left a revised memo on the table for you tonight, so that we could do all the projects with the alternates And the difference in the line items would come from, we had a savings on the cost of issuance when we took out the bond. There was a line item budget to cover the cost of issuance. That's complete back in July when we actually took out the bond. So the majority of it is coming from that, that line item, 39,000, and then we would utilize a little under $3,000 from the contingency line in the bond projects, not the general funds contingency line. All these funds are coming out of the money that we borrowed last July.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion to accept this purchase on page 58, and then we can discuss?
Move to award Save More Cooling and Heating of Southington, Connecticut contract for replacement of 3 air handlers, ductwork, and VAV modifications, baseboard heating installation, supply and installation of cooling pools for existing rooftop unit at Amity Middle School, including 3 alternates, return air fans and isolation valves at the bid price, including the 3 alternates of $1,219,600.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do we have a second? Mr. Cardozo, thank you. What did the Amity Finance Committee do with this one, Mr. Cardozo?
Sailed right through.
Okay.
Grateful for the savings. Thanks to Mr. Martoni.
Any questions or comments from anyone? Okay, then we call the roll.
Mr. Belmonte?
Yes.
Mr. Rao?
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo?
Yes.
Ms. Heikler?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
Griffin?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Thank you.
Ready to go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, so the monthly financial statements, most of the changes come on the expense side. So we're starting to, we keep looking at everything in this COVID light and see how things change. So one of the things on salaries is that, there were a couple reductions in fall sports and student clubs, so we'll see some savings there. The insurance, the medical account is still under budget, so I'm capturing some more of that savings. The snowplow budget, though, is over budget by 23,000. We'll see a transfer request later in the forecast for that. That's through February. The utilities, we are actually seeing a savings. It's difficult to predict. We had thought that between additional hand washing and keeping the air handlers on longer and having more fresh air coming, we might see an increase in utilities. But I guess offset by the decrease in the use of the buildings, the volume of students in buildings at this point through, February, we anticipate we're going to capture some savings there, even though we are returning to a more full model. So in electricity, we expect about 35,000 and I believe about 15 in water. So those are some positive. Unemployment claims, we've been contesting them all year because we really have kept people pretty well employed. So we've kind of resolved a lot of those issues that were hanging out. So we feel comfortable in lowering that amount of money. I will note that we did capture that 507,000, which is the 1%. This is the first month that it's actually, it still has to be voted on by the board, but it's giving you the example in the Excel spreadsheet, what the finances would look like should the board vote on that at the end of August. So the balance of 280,000 that we're projecting is inclusive of putting away the 1% into the capital non-recurring account. You will see a couple transfers as we go further along for accounts we had borrowed money from for COVID expenses, and they can't support that, so we're putting money back.
we have the Director of Finance Administration approved transfers under 3,000, found on page 90. Small ones. And then we have the budget transfers of 3,000 or more, found on page 91.
So the first two transfers are what I just mentioned, that we had moved money out of these accounts to cover COVID expenses, but their full budget amounts are needed, so we are looking at other accounts that have funds available to move them in. So one is transportation fuel, and the second one is for special education. I will note in the motion, it talks about technology, that was a leftover from last month. It's really special education accounts. And the third one is the snow budget that was over budget, and we're taking 23,000 from the facilities contingency account. The facilities contingency account, if all these transfers are approved, will have about 23,000 left in it, and the general board facility account has about 57,000 left in it.
And for all three of these, the AFC did approve unanimously.
Great. Would it be prudent to take these all at once? Is that something someone would like to make a motion for?
Sure.
Mr. Brown?
Move to approve all three transfers together from transportation, special ed, and then for snow removal.
Okay. Do we have a second? Ms. Carlson, thank you. And any discussion regarding that? Okay, none. Call the vote.
Mr. Belmonte?
Yes.
Mr. Rao?
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo?
Yes.
Ms. Eichler?
Yes.
Mr. Davis, oh, sorry, Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. So now we need a motion to accept all three. Would someone like to make that motion? Ms. Carlson,
I'll make a
thank you.
motion to accept all three, transportation, special education, and snow removal.
Great. Ms. Cardozo, second. Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Belmonte?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Cardozo?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo?
Yes.
Ms. Eichler?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Dr. Turner?
Yes.
Great. That motion passes as well. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to our last committee, policy. Mr. Howard.
We had our meeting on Monday, February 22nd, and our next meeting will be Tuesday, March 3rd at 30.
Okay.
And with Mr. Howard's permission, I'm happy to walk everybody through the first and second reads.
Much appreciated.
All right, so for first reads, policy 5125, that is currently an existing Board of Education policy. Mr. Brandt had asked us to take a look at this because we had conflicting information about the timeline for parents of special education students to receive copies of their records. And so we did start to take a look at it. Our policy was rather cumbersome, so I turned to CABE and then I turned to our board's attorney and asked for less cumbersome policies, which they were unable to provide because the student records and confidentiality and access to records is very much strictly governed by state statute and FERPA protections. And so what we ended up doing was primarily using the policy that was recommended by the Board of Education attorney. We did make a couple minor changes in there from language that we preferred from CABE that we felt was a little more clear. But overall, the policy review does address Mr. Brandt's concern with the different timelines. It makes us compliant with all of the updated federal laws, and is certainly a policy that we can work with. Mr. Brandt and Mrs. LaPlante, our Director of Counseling, went through this. We are still working on the regulation that goes with this policy, but we are pretty pleased with the changes that we were able to make in 5125. Moving on to policy 4111. This is also an existing Board of Education policy. However, it is my opinion that the Board of Education policy, which only addresses the recruitment and selection of administrative staff, is not comprehensive. It misses the recruitment and selection of all the staff that we have in the district. So we really built this policy off of the CAVE model. And what I am recommending that we do is we move the board's existing policy, which is very specific about the administrators, into regulation that is part of this policy. And again, it does address some changes that happened recently with Teachers Retirement Board and the hiring of retired teachers. So this also brings us compliant with existing expectations of TRB and state statute. Policy 4112.1 is an existing policy from the Board of Education. And the only thing that we did was add in the third paragraph, which was part of the CAVE model, but is not currently part of the Amity policy. And I think that just provides further clarification of the importance of the contracts. Policy 4112.2 is a existing board policy. However, it is so far off of the legislative modifications that we just wholeheartedly adopted the CAVE policy as a replacement for our existing policy and updated all of the legal references. And then policy 4112.5, there have been significant changes in the background checks and fingerprinting requirements and expectations. And so again, this was a replacement for the existing policy because the changes were so significant, we really couldn't preserve what existed in our current policy. So that is, those are the, I believe, all the first reads. Yes? Okay. Again, this is a great opportunity to provide feedback before they go back to the policy committee if there's any changes or suggestions.
Does anyone have any comments or questions for the committee or Dr. Byers regarding these 5? If not, Mr. Davis has a comment. Yes, Mr. Davis.
On the policy on recruitment, let me get back to it here. We did at the policy committee meeting discuss some of the concerns. I particularly had a concern with the second paragraph on this, and even the third paragraph as it relates to the heterogeneity of the community. And not to prolong a discussion here, but I think the policy committee also agreed at the time that we be looking this over and trying to come up with language that is more appropriate for the goals that we wish to attain.
Yes, so I believe the policy committee, there's another policy, I think 4111.3, that we sent back to the drawing board that will specifically address minority recruitment programs. So that will be coming in at the next meeting. because we were kind of recrafting that one.
If there's no other comments or questions, we can certainly get any questions or comments to the committee before the next meeting. And we can move on to the second reads.
Yes. So hopefully the second reads have come before you already. 3324 is a existing, or was a recommended policy. We added the language with respect to the contract limitations because that is how the Amity Board of Education has operated. The capital outlay, and I believe that this was, there was a question on this one in terms of its alignment with the Amity Board of Finance and the idea of recommendation versus being approved, and we did check some of that language. The residency requirements, again, that was a necessary revision to try to help us be a little more fiscally responsible to the towns when it comes to non-resident students, and that one has a fairly extensive regulation that we already have prepared behind that. And then we have the beginnings of the revisions of the 4000 series, which include both policy 4000, as well as a mandated policy for drug and alcohol testing of school bus drivers. And then lastly, we had this policy before us, I think maybe it was back in January. And then we ended up bringing it back to the committee to make sure that the student policy on alcohol use, drugs, and tobacco was aligned for students who participate in non-CIAC sanctioned activities to the same degree that they are if they are in CIAC activities. So we did some final work on that with the policy committee. So all of these came through the policy committee to move to the Board of Education for approval under second read, and that is where they sit now.
At this point, we can take a motion to accept them all at once, if people would like to do that. If not,
I have a question about 3560, so maybe we could withdraw that from the motion to approve the others?
unless there's any others that anyone else has questions on. Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to accept second reads number 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Mr. Brown, thank you. Any discussion regarding those 5?
Well, I think we want to make a, do we want to take the vote to take them all at once, right?
Well, Ms. McCrevin, I understood it that you did not want to do that. You wanted to keep that out, Ms. McCrevin? Am I?
Yeah, so policy 3560, I'd like to keep out, but we could go ahead and approve the others if you'd like. Makes it easier.
So we could have a vote to accept those other 5, right? Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Piro? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we can call the roll on that.
Mr. Belfonte?
Yes.
Mr. Rao?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo?
Yes.
Ms. Eichler?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So now we need a motion to accept second reads 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
So moved.
Mr. Brown, I heard, and who was the second?
Mr. Brown made the motion,
Ms.
and I
McCrevin.
believe Ms. McCrevin
Ms.
was the
McCrevin,
second.
Thank you. Any discussion regarding those 5? None, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Belfonte?
Yes.
Mr. Rao?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. DeMayo?
Yes.
Ms. Eichler?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Hubbard?
Yes.
Kevin?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So that motion passes. And can someone make a motion to accept policy 3560? And then we can discuss that one.
I'd actually like to make a motion to send that one back to committee because I have a couple of questions, but so I'll make a motion to send it back to committee so we can discuss.
Okay. Would someone like to second that? Mr. Brown?
I'll second it so we can discuss and we can vote about it.
Okay, so let's discuss.
Okay.
Mr. Brown?
So, yeah, I had brought up a couple of concerns about it matching with the Finance Committee policy, and I can't quite tell from the packet what, if any, changes may have been made. So I was hoping that you know, maybe in the future we could have that in the either strike through or red text or whatever to indicate changes. But as it is, the text that is here seems to have a different definition of emergency and then does not reference that a meeting of the AFC, an emergency or special meeting of the AFC is contemplated. So I guess my concern here is that if you're only looking at this policy, you're not going to realize you have to look at the other policy as well. So I guess that is my concern. And I'd like to see us tighten this up a little bit. And then lastly, it occurred to me when I was reading the AFC policy that there's a line in there about the AFC itself. Let's see. There's a paragraph on the second page of 9132.6, the AFC policy, that says the board superintendent or director of finance administration may propose new budget or fiscal policies to the AFC for consideration and its recommendation. Any recommendations by the AFC with respect to such suggestions or proposals shall be presented to the full board for its final approval. It seems to kind of scope out a role in policy for AFC. Not sure if it's clear whether the kind of change we're contemplating in the other policy is something that should go to AFC for a recommendation or not. And so if we're looking at both of these policies, perhaps we need to clarify that. But back to the committee to ask their opinion of this. I'm not sure if you discussed at your meeting.
So that's the bylaw 9132.6.
Correct, yeah. I guess that would be my request, that at your next meeting, you take a look at these two policies together to make sure that they're not confusing to board members in the future or the public, I guess, as well.
Well, and I think we can certainly address one of your points, Ms. McCrevin, very easily by just cross-referencing this with the bylaw at the end of this policy. And perhaps it was a misunderstanding, but it was my, at least understanding after the last meeting, that there was a question as to whether the Amity Finance Committee presented the board with recommendations or whether it was required to have approval. And I think that was a point that was brought up by Mr. Davis. So I believe that in reading the Finance Committee, the AFC Committee policy, it's clear that they're providing recommendations, but not necessarily approval, which I think was reflected in this capital outlay policy. So I think, so the short answer to your question is there was nothing changed because it seemed that that concept of presenting recommendations was consistent with what was in the AFC bylaws.
But yeah, so I guess that's in with regard to the emergency transfers and a recommendation about the emergency transfer, or just in general, the recommendations?
I'm sorry, is that an observation or a question?
I guess it's a question. So I'm not sure if the policy committee was considering only the emergency expenditure question of whether it's a recommendation or an approval vote by finance. or whether it was just limited to all the recommendations that come, because the Amity Finance Committee can't on its own do anything to the budget. It's always making recommendations. That
So I'm looking at 9132.6,
Mhm.
and it says that for the emergency side, it says that AFC shall report emergency transfers for consideration and approval at the next regularly scheduled board meeting. For non-emergencies, it says that the board and superintendent and director of finance administration will propose new budgets or fiscal policies for the AFC to consider and its recommendation. It does not say anything about the AFC approving anything.
the paragraph above that, Chris, at the top of that page.
Right?
So that middle sentence there, in the event of such an emergency line item transfer, consider a recommendation of the emergency line item transfer to the full board.
It's a recommendation.
Right. Yeah, there it's a recommendation. In the other paragraph you read, it was approval.
It's a recommendation to the board for the board's approval.
Mhm.
It's all approval. It's all recommendation. It's not, the AFC has no powers by itself.
Right. So the policy that we're looking at tonight doesn't say anything about a meeting, though. It just says that you need to inform the chair of the AFC. The AFC policy says inform the chair and have a meeting.
Well, it says.
Well, it says we shall request that meeting. It doesn't say we have to, because the AFC and or the chairperson, as has frequently happened, have typically just said, we'll approve it at the next meeting because it's an emergency transfer. So again, the meeting request is different than a meeting actually occurring. So I think present even more confusion if we said in the 3560 that we had to hold a meeting because we make the request for a special AFC meeting, but that doesn't necessarily mean the AFC agrees to that request.
Yeah, and this has come up in the past. I guess maybe my request would be that the policy committee actually take a look at this for clarity's sake, because I think we're all agreeing here that the two different policies say two different things, and it might be clearer if they said the same thing or said it in language that was clear. So requesting a meeting versus holding a meeting. How do you, I don't understand the difference between the two. And we have tripped up on this in the past. So that's my suggestion, that these two go back at the same time to the policy committee. That's all.
Okay. Well, at the very least, we could discuss putting language in it that had cross-reference at the very least, right?
Yes, that we can certainly
we
do at the end.
So we can do that at the end. So maybe the best thing to do would be to send it back to policy, and then we can revisit it in a month.
Does it need a look over by the council, just to look at I'm not seeing it.
You know, I'll be happy, because at this point, I've looked at this policy 3 times. I asked Mr. Davis to look at it because he's kind of our policy guru. And now, Mr. Brow, you're the third person who still can't see the discrepancy. So I will send them to the board's council for their opinion, and then I will bring back whatever. The only thing, I will not ask them to change the existing AFC bylaw, because that one we haven't even tackled. So I will just ask them to decide if 3560 presents any conflicting opinion to the existing AFC bylaw.
Good idea. Okay, so there's a motion and a second. Can we?
Could I have one more request in there? I guess I'm wondering, is there a role for the AFC in at least being informed of this? Maybe we just include it for informational purposes in their next meeting so that they're aware that we're looking at this policy.
I mean, I think we can certainly let the chairperson of the AFC know, and she can make a determination.
Thank you.
you just want to Sheila, just want to withdraw your motion, and then we'll just let it wait till next time. We don't have to vote on it then.
Sure. As long as we have the same intention as the motion, I can withdraw the motion.
We can just withdraw the motion, and then we'll bring it back next time.
Can I just get clarification? So the motion I have right now is to send 3560 back to policy. Are we taking that motion off? Is that?
Yes, I'm withdrawing the motion.
Because it'll just go
Yeah, then it
back.
just goes
We
back
don't
to
need to
policy.
move, we don't need to do anything. And then we don't need to roll again.
Okay, so that's where I'm from. Okay, so that moves us to item number 10, personnel.
So we just started some conversations with our board attorney to start the negotiations with paraeducators union and the nurses. So we're at the point of getting dates on the calendar. That's about it.
Okay, let's get started. Okay, and any new business? Okay, seeing none. Items for the next agenda, due to the chair by March 22nd, please. And at this point, we can take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn at 8:06.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
And Mr. DeMayo, second.
Yeah, you got it then.
All those in favor, we can do a thumbs up on the screen? Or a
Hand
wave?
waves.
Hand waves?
Sounds good.
Terry didn't raise her
That's
hand.
good.
She wants to stay.
Thanks.
Poor Terry.